and technology solutions, but the creative prowess of an individual is unable at this time to be replicated. It is, in the words of Davis and Easling, a topic that could hardly be more central and inseparable from our humanity. So human creativity is something that can't be replicated. So the new normal must harus emphasize creativity in the solutions, in productivity, as Dr. Sunatro just talked about, and in expression. So I love the quote on this slide that the desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of the human soul. And so we see that in so many areas. We see that in the cooking arts, in floral design, in watercolor painting, in car design, automotive design, in architecture. We have varied expressions of that. And if we agree that the desire to create is a deep yearning of the human soul, then we have to ask, how is that deep yearning expressed in our classroom? Do we allow it to have expression in our classrooms? So there's two authors here at the bottom, Erwin Raphael McManus and Fujimura. And they actually have two amazing books, and there are several talks that you can find online where they really talk about the importance of the creative expression. And I'm just going to put right in our chat room a few links that you might appreciate in just doing some of your additional work. Oh, so sorry. Okay, here we go. I will send you this one. And because sometimes we just want to go a little bit deeper on a subject. So I thought that I would just provide that for you so that those of you who are lifelong learners, and I know that's everyone in this group, can just do a little bit more research on that. Excuse me. So, oops, my slide is not advancing. Just a moment here. We're actually going to skip that part just so that we are on track with our time. This slide has two books on it. One is by Daniel Pink, and the other one is by Thomas Friedman. And both of the books were published in the early 2000s, so in 2005 and in 2006. And because they realized that some things were really changing. So Daniel Pink believed that right-brained people would rule the world. And he saw some significant changes coming, and that artificial intelligence would introduce, and he published this cautionary yet hopeful handbook. Now, for research purposes, we look at the publication dates and they seem almost ancient, don't they? But there was a prophetic nature to his work, and that has proven very accurate. So Pink believed that any rote skill that could be automated would absolutely be automated. And he believed that a lot of that would happen in Asia because of the advanced platform from which Asia has always operated. And he believed that cultivating creativity in 6 specific spheres as a lifelong learner would allow an individual to remain in a sphere of meaningful contribution. And those 6 spheres are listed over on the left: design, story, symphony, empathy, play, and meaning. So here, I love this graphic provided to us by Publishing Academy that really shows the differences in the left brain area and in the right brain area. And so here are just some brief definitions of these 6 areas. So design is utility enhanced by significance. So that means that design can be beautiful, but it can be meaningful as well. That story, the way that we talk about history, the way that we talk about a business deal, if we include context and the narrative, it enhances the facts. So it's not either or, but it's both and. And then symphony is multiple elements that create a larger whole. So I appreciate so much the presentation I just heard from Dr. Sunarto, because he talked about very complicated challenges that are facing our world. And we need many people from many disciplines speaking into those issues with solutions. So empathy is also important. It is the unique human capability to acknowledge and share the feelings of others. And that has become so important in this time of COVID. Play. This is having a sense of humor, being able to laugh, the ability to relax and balance your psyche between stress and work and just the enjoyment of life. And then meaning is recognizing the purpose of our individual contributions. So Pink's publication, perhaps even unknowingly, introduced the conceptual era from which subsequent industrial revolutions have roots. So if we mentally review the processes and aims of many of our curricular resources, these six senses are generally not included or even acknowledged. So what is our first education implication? So one of the first ones is, how do we include elements of these six senses into our classroom activities and curricular objectives? So I'm going to share a few examples with you that come from the areas of design and play. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you quickly is a blog post that was very instructive to me when we talk about design. And I appreciate that he has kind of prompted me on some issues with design and how I use design with students in the classroom. And so I'm going to head back over here to sharing my screen. So one of the examples that I'm going to talk about 3 examples in music, in memes, and in check-ins. And so one of the things that I've realized is that I try to bring some playfulness into my classroom just through the images that I use. Rather than just having a plain background on my PowerPoint, I try to sometimes use images that will surprise my students. And I'm going to invite you to participate in the next few slides. So get ready in your React with your React button and over in the chat box. So I usually always have music playing when my students come into my class, if it's face-to-face or even virtually. And I try to choose music that will help me introduce the theme of the day. And then we can just use that as a place where we begin to have conversation. And music has such an emotional impact on students, and it helps them relax and it helps them focus in a different way. So let's go to, like, here is a check-in slide that I might use where I just want to ask the students to give me a little hint on their attitudes. So I'll say sometimes like, what number are you feeling today? So let's just do that quickly. Just jump over into the chat room. How are you feeling today? You've been in a conference for a long time here today. What number would you give your attitude right now this afternoon? What number might you give? Okay, let me just look. What number? So you've been looking on that for a minute. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go over. Okay, so we have some 3s, some 1s, 2s, 5s, 4, 3, 2. Okay. So we see that we have a range of how we are approaching learning today. And just by that little bit of a check-in, I get a sense of how you are feeling. And so I'm looking at number 2s and number 5s. Oh, we've got some number 3s who are maybe a little bit tired, some number 5s. I like that. Okay, now I'm going to ask you just to choose between these memes. Like if you were to choose one of these memes that described your experience this year with online teaching and online learning and so much use of technology, what number would you use? Number 1, or what do you choose? Number 1 or number 2? What has been your experience? Do you look at this from the teacher perspective or from a parent perspective? So what? I'm going to kind of look at the chat room. Okay, so I've got some people saying, yep, number 2. Some of you are saying number 1. Yep. More number 2s coming in. Yep, yep. Okay. Okay. So, sorry, I thought I was already sharing. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to give you another set of memes. How do you think that your students might be perceiving this year? Are they worried about what their school yearbook picture is going to look like? Or are they thinking about what it's like to learn online? What do you think rings true for your students? Now, picture number 3 or number 4? Okay, so some of you are saying 3, some of you are saying 4. Yep, thank you. Thank you, yep. I'm seeing those answers. Thank you. Okay. So I appreciate that we have research gives us a lot of different ways to define creativity. I really appreciate that creativity is not only defined by the 6 spheres mentioned by Pink, but Still and D. Iverno in 2016 provided a historical view and definition of the 2 streams of creativity. A G creative is one that has received a birthright from their creator. And the N creative is one that is making manifest a thriving intellectual ability that is evidenced in a life well lived. And they argue that we need both in order to exist and thrive in creative agency. So agency is not something that is manipulated or controlled, but it is expressed. Okay, so I appreciate this little image that is taken from a preschool for deaf children, because they know that imagination is what will fuel their students. So in considering the definitions of the G creative and the N creative, there is a clear call for us to encourage and support novel learner inquiry, exploration, and expression. And instead of viewing knowledge attainment as the highest goal, students are to be respected and considered able to develop their own potentials by themselves and not estimated by test scores alone. We have seen a surge and a rise in independent learning in our new normal. And I believe independent learning will now always be with us in some form or fashion. So the question for us becomes, how do we best support creative inquiry in that area? So our second educational implication is, how can we support it in diverse assignments that allow for creative expression? So I love this graphic of the left and right brain, the left and right brain. So some of the examples here that I've listed are I like to give rubric points to the unusual or the uncommon expression. So I want to show value for taking risks. And I want to also provide optional outputs. So maybe in one assignment, they can respond with a video, with writing, with a poster, with an interview, or a series of social media posts. That becomes a challenge for the teacher in how are we going to grade each one of those? But it provides a lot of agency for the student. So I want to just briefly mention an amazing article that was published by MIT's Technology Review in 2019. They published a fascinating article detailing a new program released in China that provides students with an AI customized tutoring solution named Squirrel. And there has been strong success in helping students overcome intimidation about subjects that are difficult for them. They have an in-person and online teacher that is supporting their success. So in the article, Hal mentions, I tried to imagine what this world might be like and whether we might be better off for it. I asked the students one last question. Is there anything that Squirrel could improve? After a long pause, right? The students responded, I wish we had more interaction with our human teachers. Now, teachers already have relationships with students, but the relationships now that will be required are going to be a little bit different, not just of knowing the names of the students and maybe some of their strengths, but in mentoring and modeling lifelong learning. So it will continue. Creative, meaningful, supportive, and encouraging relationships with students will continue to gain importance. Allowing them to observe the teacher's endeavors in lifelong learning will become a necessary model. Students do not need more knowledge because facts can be Googled, but curating information, discerning its importance, applying and using knowledge, that is wisdom. And that's what our students need in relationship with teachers. I love these quotes. Children need at least one person in their life who thinks the sun rises and sets on them, someone who delights in their existence and loves them unconditionally. I can still remember the teacher who believed in me and let me borrow her belief in me. Find your react button. Do you remember the first teacher who believed in you? Do you remember that person? Do you remember their name? Okay, I'm seeing a few things coming in the chat room, and I'm wanting to see, are you actually, I'm asking you to hit your react button. So let me just look at the screen here. Yeah, so a few of you are responding to that. You remember what it was like to have somebody believe in you. And we have the massive and amazing opportunity to believe in other students. So our next implication, how can we be more intentional in creating positive relationships with our students? One of the things I love to do is tell students that I expect them to make mistakes and give them the freedom to do that. Another thing I do is I have checkup questions that I ask them. I'll ask a small group to stay back in my Zoom classroom or in an in-person classroom. And I ask them 4 questions there on the left. How are you doing? How are you staying connected to friends? How are you getting out in the world? And then what have you learned about yourself? That is my favorite question. What are you learning about yourself? Now, largely what educators do is we help prepare students for the future. And one of the great resources right now that I would encourage you to download is a job displacement index. And this index is powerful because it rates, I've just dropped it over in the chat room, because it rates actually, I'm going to do this really quick. Thank you. We're almost here at the end because this rates what jobs AI can possibly take over. And it puts them on this quadrant, and it forces us to look at dexterity, complexity, compassion, creativity, and strategy. If you have those 5 skills, that is going to be very hard for AI to replicate. So in allowing our curriculum to highlight those ideas and to employ them within the classroom, that will be significant. So I'm going to, this is really kind of the end and the meat. I just had a few concluding thoughts, but this is really kind of the end of what I wanted to share with you today. And these amazing quotes right here, also from Lee, that we can embrace lifelong learning because new technologies create new opportunities, and we should have the discipline of independent learning. And we should treasure our creativity, our conceptual thinking, our strategic thinking, our dexterity, and most of all, our compassion. These are things that AI cannot do and make humanity shine. So I am ending here. And I noticed that a few of you had already, you were so quick on putting some questions in the chat room.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ma'am Darcy, for the visit. It's very interesting and informative, of course. So there are several questions from the audience. Are you going to directly answer the question, or I say to you the question and then you directly answer the question? Which one do you prefer?
Either what you can ask the question, then everybody can hear it if they're not over in the chat room.
Okay then. So we still have a few minutes for the discussion session, and then maybe we will have 2 or 3 questions to be discussed about.
Okay.
Okay, for the first question, this is from Nyamasta. Mrs. Darcy, in the development of artificial intelligence, will it be possible that teachers' activities will be changed by robotic? And if so, what should we do now to prepare for the future development of teaching and learning processes later on?
Excellent, excellent question. Any task that we do as teachers that can be automated will be automated. So I think about what Google Classroom already automates for us.
I'm sorry, ma'am, could you, the microphone?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so anything that we do that can be automated will be automated. 100%, I'm sure of that. So Google Classroom already does that for us, right? When we can create a Google form and the quizzes will grade themselves. So anything that can be automated will be automated. But I will tell you that the relationship that you have with students, your ability to inspire, your ability to encourage, your ability to model lifelong learning, those are things that a robot can really not replicate. And so in that way, I want to focus on building within me the ability to encourage my students, the ability to empower them, the ability to model for them how I am currently being a lifelong learner. So great question.
Okay, thank you. And then for the next question, from Dina Logaya from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. The question is how to collaborate learning and creativity. Especially what challenges should be prepared as a teacher, and she asked for what books should be read related to learning creativity.
Yes, so excellent. I posted 2 books by 2 authors, and I also included links to 2 of their talks about creativity. So I would encourage you to access those, number 1. Also, ACSD has a really great book on creativity, and I will find that and throw that into the chat room as well. So collaborating on learning and creativity, I really believe in a transdisciplinary model for that. So I teach global perspectives, and I love to collaborate with the art teacher. When I'm wanting my students to do a poster presentation, I want her to be teaching some skills. I want me to be looking at some content skills. We talk about overpopulation. Well, that has direct links over into the social science area. So I want to be collaborating with that teacher. How can we together create a project that will have great meaning for the students? And I also like to connect with our religion teacher, because all of these areas have faith implications. And I want our students to be considering big issues around the idea of our faith. I will say this: we ask students, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do? And I would suggest to you that's the wrong question. And Dr. Sunarto actually he really pointed to this. Our question to students should be, what problem do you want to help solve in your life, or help to solve in your lifetime? Because just if we want them to do something or to be something, that is very confining and static. However, if I give them a vision of a problem I want them to solve, they will constantly be engaged, and they will continue to evolve, and they will continue to learn and adapt because they want to solve that problem. And we have big problems now in our global community for them to solve. So thank you. I just realized I might have went on and on that, but I'm very passionate about those ideas of collaboration. Yeah.
Thank you, Ma'am Darcy. Actually, we still have several questions. Could you please answer one more question? Later on, maybe you can take a look into the chat box. And
Sure.
then this is about, do you have suggestion to deal with poor internet connection, especially for online classes? Because as you know, that in rural areas or there are poor connection for the internet. And then is there any solution in order to keep the students developing their creativity, as well as we can run the lesson or the classes due to or in order to achieve the educational goals?
Yes. Okay. Poor internet connection. I grieve that for students. They'll chat me and while I'm teaching, and they'll say, "Miss, I have laggy internet." And I feel horrible for that. One thing that I do is I try to be extra prepared in Google Classroom. So I have already, for every lesson, I try to have some prompts for them, so that really they can learn independently, so that even if they have a poor internet connection, they can at least access some of what I'm talking about. And I try to make it very self-explanatory. I also do 2 to 3 minute short videos that I can text to students over line, so that they can just kind of get a really abbreviated but content-filled video. I don't even like to see myself on video, but I know that for them, it provides a connective piece that's important. So I try to overcome it in that way. I try to be over-prepared. So I already want to have all of my semester 2 already out there, and I make them live between 1 and 2 weeks ahead of time, so the students can feel prepared. So even if they miss part of the class, they still know where we're headed with our ideas and with our information. How to assess student creativity? Oh, what a great question. So I don't always know how to assess creativity, but what I can do is I can assess if they have taken a risk in learning. And you know your students, you're getting to know them by now. And so I know the students that typically, they only give me 1 or 2 sentence answers, or, they don't want to speak out in class, or they only speak in small groups. So when they do have a learning, when they do speak out and they do give a contribution that is different from what they normally do, they only hear encouragement from me. Yes. Oh, thank you. Now your contribution has made our class better today. Thank you for that. And the more I encourage, the more they're willing to participate. I also talk to them about learning behaviors, and that learning behavior they have to own is making mistakes, and making mistakes boldly. And I've noticed that that helps them take risks. I do have a couple, there are some helps, like in creating rubrics that help me assess. I have some resources from Learning Planet. There's also a rubric generator online that I've used, and I've looked at some of their creative rubrics. That's been helpful. And as far as making creative learning now, I have them doing a lot of things like create a graphic representation of a thinking process, or I have them do a lot of infographic kind of work right now that engages them differently in the process. Thank you for those questions. I'm passionate about this, and thank you for letting me answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Darcy, for the RC for the information, and your explanation is very clear. And before we end, I would like we can conclude that we know that being creative will lead the students, to expectation creation and then curiosity expansion, as well as lower the resistance of the students. And of course, relationship among teachers and students should be maintained and developed well. And of course, creativity should be endeavored, since it leads to their future life. And for sure, long life learning cannot be replaced by AI or artificial intelligence. Thank you so much, Ma'am Darcy Dreker Maher, for your presentation. And then now we are going to move to our next invited speaker. And for now, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Lilia Halim.
Hello.
Prof. Lilia, are you available? Okay, thank you so much.
Hi.
Welcome in this plenary session. Before Prof. Lilia present the material, I would like to read a brief CV of Professor Lilia. So, Prof. Lilia Halim graduated from King's College London in science education, and then she is a professor in science education in the Faculty of Education in the National University of Malaysia. Her research interest and work revolves around promoting scientific literacy through three main research thrusts: investigating and developing science teachers' pedagogical content knowledge, or PCK, and then the next one, propagating pedagogical model for promoting innovative thinking in science, and now known as STEAM education. And the next one is exploring the role of non-formal science learning in the Malaysian context. And Prof. Lilia was also involved in the roadmap planning for science and mathematics from 2015 until 2020, and for the Regional Science and Mathematics Center in Penang. In addition, she and the team from UKM was involved in the evaluation of the Malaysian education system that provided input to the Malaysian education blueprint from 2013 until 2025. And then Prof. Lilia has also contributed to the source spike on pedagogical for girls in STEAM as part of Malaysia or UNESCO IBE project. and strengthening STEM curricula for girls in Africa and Asia and the Pacific. And in terms of publication, Profilia has written research articles in the Science and Mathematics Journal and book chapters in publishers such as Kluwer, Springer, and then Routledge and Science publishers. Profilia, for now, she is going to share with us about learning science at home in new normal on education. Profilia, it's time for you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
It's very clear.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the organizer for inviting me to share part of our research that was focusing on non-formal science learning and how this particular research is related to the impact of COVID-19 on education, specifically in science education. So this is an outline of what I'm going to share on. Something on, I'm sure everybody knows what is the impact, but I'd like to explain briefly because it puts the context of my presentation. And then looking at what is the learning ecosystem that perhaps might help looking into how we could leverage on it for ensuring continuing education during and beyond COVID-19. Some practical activities and suggestions based on our research, a research that I have done with my PhD student, and the outcome of that, plus some critical success factors or pitfalls in doing these activities, and some suggestions for perhaps research on this issue and field of study. So since yesterday, we have heard from the minister, the keynote speaker number 1, how Indonesia reacts to the impact of COVID-19 on education. And I think that is not unique, as he says. It is also happening in Malaysia. And first of all is this remote teaching, as our previous speaker has mentioned, that this can, of course, disrupt to any form or any discipline of teaching, especially science teaching and learning environment, in which we have the practical skills that they need to develop. And we heard about how many countries responded to this, either open up the schools, in which there's green zone area, or we close the schools and we open it again. So there is definitely will be a learning loss involved, in the sense students interrupted in their learning. But we know that learning should be continued, otherwise there will be a widen of inequalities between different diverse groups of students based on their socio-economic backgrounds. So the impact of COVID-19 on education is actually falls on parents. This is what I'm going to share of what we have done research on parents, because now parents is at the center of this new normal education, at least in Malaysia, when even you have online learning, the parents to assist the students or their child at home to at least follow the instruction online by the teachers, or look into the homework that they have to do. So we were drawing upon a model, an ecological system model by Bronfenbrenner. And I think it's a model that even among the Malaysians, or perhaps in Indonesia, we have a proverb in the sense that to raise a child, you need the whole village. The education of a child is actually should be supported by the village. In this sense, in this model, there are very direct interaction to the development of the child, which is close to them. That is the home, the childcare or the school, the neighborhood, and any outdoor activities. As you go outside, as you go, the layer after this will be still there is a link to their education, but it's not so direct as the one in the green circle, in which we have institutions like the university or non-governmental agencies that could also play a role in the education of the child. And of course, we have the government's role as well. Like, for example, the impact of COVID-19, the government has done a lot supporting in providing masks, medical masks, or healthcare, and other related policies. So what I'm saying here is that what COVID-19 has actually brought us to understand that even though we know parents are involved in the education of the child, but it has highlighted the fact that the role is being enhanced now, especially when remote teaching is involved. So a fact, a finding that is related to especially teams of PISA achievement, it appears that parents play a significant role in the students' achievement, especially from countries listed here, Singapore, Japan, mainland China. So the role of parents are more important or significant now, and it should be beyond the COVID-19. So in our study, we realized that actually in Malaysia, parents give support before to science learning, but usually it's in terms of psychological motivation and in fact monetary, like buying books or buying related materials, but they are not involved in the learning of the child. So Epstein suggests that there should be an interaction space between the teachers, parents, and students for effective learning at home, or what we call through interactive homework, which I'll explain later. So as mentioned by the minister of earlier, there were questions to the speaker previously. What if there's lack of internet connectivity? So we have seen continued education, it could be done through high technology, where we have online learning totally, and the device will be involved laptop, desktop, and related devices. There's also a blended kind of technology. People use social media to some extent. Those who do not have smartphone will probably use SMS. And of course, there is no technology at all where we provide hard copy activity sheets and use the home environment or outdoor environment. There's no device involved. So the next few slides, I'll discuss about this part of it, on how parents and students and teachers could be working collaboratively to ensure learning. Just a caveat here, the research that we have done, it is not to respond to COVID, but it is something that we have done where we saw that non-formal education, that means involving the parents, can complement to the learning of students through the formal education. So it's a complementary kind only. So what I'm suggesting here, perhaps what we have done could be extended to the education, during and beyond COVID-19. So what we did was to create an interactive homework. It's on an activity sheet. And to do that, we have to ensure that teachers and parents play their role. Parents and students also play their role. So the role of teachers and parents, teachers have to brief the parents. It is not the common teacher-parent situation association. It is more for having collaborative work to ensure that students do their homework, and teachers provide letter of explanation. But what's more important here is notes are presented to the parents. Notes are given to the parents. But so I forgot to say that our focus was developing students' science process skills. It's not the content, but more of process skills. And process skills consist of, for example, observation skills, analyzing, comparing, and so on. So our study just focused on observation skills, which is very important skill that is required in the science learning and in other disciplines. So parents, we found out that parents were interested to actually help, to be involved in their child's learning, but they do not know how to do it. So we provide notes to them. We ask for agreement, consent agreement. Then we provide the homework to the students. At the same time, there is also the role of parents and students. They need to work together to meet the learning objectives that's being requested from this interactive homework. Provide guidelines to the students on how to do the homework, in which parents play the role of learning as well. And as the previous speakers has mentioned, students behave like scientists. They interact with the objects around their home surrounding together with their parents while carrying out their activities as requested. So the nature of activities are very close to them. Look at objects in the kitchen, look at objects around the house or around the community. So this is in Malay, and actually is an evaluation sheet on what the teacher will be expecting outcome of the students' work in terms of the observation skills. So the left side says that if the students have done the work due to the diligence, they will have used the 5 senses in doing observation, hearing, listen, smell, touch, and all the 5 senses, taste, and then able to see what's the difference and what's the similarities of the object that they are observing, and also able to describe what changes have occurred. So they have, we have a scoring sheet here, and if they could do that, we would give marks. The teachers will give marks over here. But what other activities are required? These students, I'm sorry, I forgot to say again, they are primary school children, age of 9 years. So there are many activities related to observation skills. For example, on this part of the slide, they were asked to look at or identify any kind of animals around their house, and to characterize the shape of the animal, and how in terms of their color, in terms of the types of the fur, and so on. This side is another activity that looks at plants, around their area. So looking at the color, the smell, the feel of it, and so on. So what they need to do is to fill up to fill out what they have observed and which of the 5 senses that they use to identify the characteristics that they have observed. So this is again, how is it going to be evaluated? According to the constructs that they request as an outcome of the observational skills. For example, the first construct is the child has been able to characterize the object using the 5 senses, and then able to characterize it confidently and using the correct measurement tool to measure, and they do it in sequence. So we got some data looking at this, and we found out that before they did this particular homework, we tested them on their observation skills. It was lower, it was about 2.27 in terms of mean value. And after the homework, we had a control group. I'm just showing the experimental group here. It has risen. And in fact, after 2 or 3 weeks, we followed through the same students, and we found out that the skills, the acquisition of the skills maintained, not as huge gain from before going through the homework, but it is maintained more than what they have been tested before. So that's a delayed post-test. We call it delayed post-test. A little bit on their parents' background. This is the mother's background, and this is the father, the background. And this is their educational background. So we see that there are some with primary qualification, secondary, diploma, and what types of job they are doing. Some are working on their own. The parents, the mother, most of the time do not work. Also office work and shifts meaning they have to work different times of the day. And this is for the mother's background, and this is the father. So it's kind of the blue bar shows the control group, and the black bar shows the experimental group. So they seem to have similar characteristics of parents' educational background and working background between those 2 groups. So from primary qualification, secondary, and diploma level, and the types of work that they are involved. This is important because we interviewed them and we asked them what were the challenges when they had to do this task with their child, and what were the positive outcome as a result of this exercise with their child. So at that time, some of the parents wanted not activity sheets, hard copy, but they would say, okay, why not you have this online or in a mobile apps? That's a suggestion for them. And they found out that with this particular work that they have to do with their child, they need to actually set time. They actually gave time to do the activity together, and they found that they are actually directly involved in the learning of their with their child. And again, at that time, when we were using it, we were looking into just the hard copy, but there was suggestion of using social media apps. But again, there were challenges. As you see, some of the parents, they had to work 2 jobs at a time, morning and evening, and they have shift work, so they don't have time. They found time was a bit difficult, and based on their educational background, they thought that they couldn't help their parents, their child, despite it is not content-laden kind of activities, but it is more of a process kind of activities, just observing, being more critical on what they are looking and so on. So that has drawbacks in terms of them involving in their child's learning. So they gave some suggestions that hopefully the tasks that's given do not require a lot of time, again, because the barriers that they don't have much time. They found that the notes provided to them are useful to execute the activities, to do the activities with their child. And again, there's a positive engagement between their child and themselves towards their child's learning. And the task that we given was able to attract the child's parents and the children to execute the task collaboratively. So I'm at my last slide. Again, there's some suggestions to future work. Perhaps the first recommendation is based on if the parents do not have the required or the necessary educational background, perhaps it is more reasonable to have a communal learning center within the community, in which the teacher will have to go down and work together with parents, students, and teachers. Or at the communal learning center, we could have graduates as volunteers in the task of helping out. The recommendation one is also probably we could ask the needs of the parents on what is required to have a more effective collaborative work. Then second one is actually to create the homework or the learning activities together with the parents, because we tend to, meaning this is my opinion, teachers like university lecturers, we think that we could create activities where teachers could just implement, but it should be co-creating the work. For example, researchers and teachers, so that the implementation would be more effective and we would know the context of the situation at school. Similarly, we could do this with teachers and parents, in which we could identify the community environment of what is possible to create an effective science learning together, students and parents. When funds of knowledge here refers to looking at the environment of the house, of the community, of what's in the house and outside, so that it will be more contextual and will be meaningful for both or three tripartite parties mentioned earlier in the work. So thank you very much for listening and for your attention, and I welcome any questions or comments or any exchange of experiences. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Moderator, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Prof. Lilia Halim. It's very interesting, and for sure there are several questions regarding to your topic, and it's very interesting to know about how to learn science at home, especially in this new normal life. And the first question is about, can we just move, Prof, to the question section? Yes. Sure. So the first question is about how do we increase the parents' role to implement the STEM learning at home? And then for the next question, the opportunity, this is a question that is about how to make science education as future realization, especially in Southeast Asia. And the next one is science education research, the possible science education research in the in the new normal era and after the pandemic era. Is it understandable for the questions?
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. Time
How
is
to
yours, Prof.
increase? Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator. First question was, I believe, is how to increase the parents' participation in the students' learning, their child's learning. Okay, we have tried by giving guided notes to the parents, and also we have tried discussing with the parents on their role. I mean, teachers and the parents. But I think to increase in their engagement, as I said, perhaps if we could look from their perspective, especially on what sort of activities that they think they could contribute positively, and together with the teachers create the task. I think that's a way to go to increase the parents' role. The second question is something about future. Am I right, Madam Moderator? How to do future STEM? Okay, I was not able to get the second question, but if the person could please repeat the question, I'll be, more than happy to answer. But the third question was, what kind of science education research after COVID-19? Well, if you look beyond COVID-19, the new norm is probably to that involves blended learning. That means more on online learning. Then it would be good to see how we could construct online learning that has that's able to engage meaningfully with the students and the teachers, because we realize that even we have online learning, students may not be engaged 100% or participating with our delivery of the lessons. The other one is also we could look at the issue is how do we ensure the practical part of science education if everything has to be blended. There are initiatives we could look at, looking at videos that's being developed to show, to simulate on how an experiment should be done. The acquisition of psychomotor skills and also the science process skills I mentioned earlier. It could be videotape and sent to the students to at least view them and do the experiment at home using low-cost material, and also within what do you call it, within the safety required, because practical activity has safety element involved. So that will be another one. But science process skills not necessarily have to be everything on lab work. It could, meaning hands-on, it could be done cognitively. You could ask questions that uses these thinking, such as observation, higher order thinking skills that's related to science. You could actually do it in a pen and paper kind of activities. I think Wayne Harlan from the UK, she has actually propagated on how to inculcate science process skills just through activity sheets and not necessarily using hands-on activities. But of course, you need both, because science is actually about the environment. Students need to feel, to sense it, and there should be a blend of that. There's also a lot of simulation activity in which we could do research on it, on the effectiveness of simulation, on looking into the laboratory skills that's needed. So that's it, Madam Chairman. I hope I have answered the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for the explanation. It seems that your answer and also answered other related question regarding to the implementation of STEM, whether about in laboratory or online system. Well, thank you so much, Prof. Lilia Halim, for the presentation. It's very interesting to discuss about. And before we move to the next invited speaker, I would like to conclude that in order to support learning in new normal environment, teacher needs to create interactive activities. And for example, interactive homework where the teacher, parents, and students involved. And of course, there should be partnership among school, families, and communities. So that's all for our third invited speakers presentation. And then now we are going to move to our fourth invited speakers. Our fourth invited speakers is Prof. Dr. Judith Hanks. Now I would like to introduce her. She is an associate professor in language education, School of Education, University of Leeds, UK. She is a program leader for MA in TESOL and teacher education, and has taught in China, Italy, Singapore, and the UK. She has published extensively on exploratory practices in language education, and her research interests include intercultural and ethical issues in the co-production of fully inclusive practitioner research. And then her topic for today's plenary session is exploring the new normal in education practice, researching quality of life, resilience, and well-being. Unfortunately, she couldn't attend our virtual meeting, but she sent us a video for the presentation. Later on, if you have questions, we will email your question to her, and then please, later on, if you have questions, please write down your name and your email address, so your question will be answered directly by her. Well, for now, I would like to give the time to the host. Could you please turn on the video? Enjoy your watching.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to come and speak at your conference, The New Normal on Education in Indonesia in December 2020. My name is Judith Hanks and I'm talking to you from the University of Leeds in the UK. And the title of my talk is Exploring the New Normal in Educational Practice, Researching Quality of Life, Resilience and Well-being. I'd like to start by asking you to think about what we normally do in our classes. Please suggest your own activities for a moment. I've started the table here by putting in pair work and essays, essay writing, reports, assignments, and so on. But of course, there are many other things that we do in our classrooms. Could you take a moment, please, to fill in one or two of the empty spaces on this table? Well, I've filled in my own typical activities so that you can compare your own answers with what I would put if I were teaching at the moment. So, as well as pair work, we might also have information gap activities, group work, projects, students asking questions, using surveys or interviews or questionnaires, vocabulary building exercises, writing sentences or paragraphs or stories. I might ask my students to brainstorm ideas. They might do this alone, or they might do this together if we were all in a classroom. Gap fills, of course, very typical. Reading and answering questions. Sometimes my students do poster presentations, and of course listening and answering questions, as well as using iPads, phones, internet and so on. Though I have to be honest, before the pandemic I didn't use the internet or phones or iPads in the classroom at all. This is a new development for me and possibly for you as well. I think you'll find that most of these are very familiar. There's nothing unusual in these activities, right? Since the pandemic began in the UK, of course, we have not been teaching face-to-face. So since March, I have been having to use Zoom, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, MS Teams, Ding Talk, all sorts of different platforms to deliver my teaching. My students use the chat functions, we use breakout rooms, and there are, of course, things like Top Hat or Padlet or all sorts of other applications that can be used. And these are becoming part of the new normal. And that's one of the things that I'd like to think about today. Underpinning my talk is the notion of practitioner research. This is research which is conducted by and for practitioners, in other words, teachers, and in exploratory practice, learners and teacher educators as well. So there are lots of different types of practitioner research, which in 2017 I tried to reconceptualize as a kind of family tree. So practitioner research is like the grandmother or grandfather. Then we have action research and lots of different kinds of action research. Exploratory practice, which is the most recent addition, and also reflective practice and many others. The form I'd like to talk about today is one that I've been involved with for many years, called exploratory practice. In other words, exploring our practices in education. It's based on the idea of puzzling. This is connected to Freire's ideas in the 1970s about an education of I wonder why. And you can see here two posters produced by my students in which they asked questions like, I wonder why does it always take me so long to use a new word, although I understand? So not problem solving, but actually just questioning, wondering why. To give an example of what I mean in exploratory practice, some teacher puzzles from the UK, these are colleagues of mine, who ask questions like, why do some students feel their ability is higher than it is, while others remain permanently pessimistic? Why do so many students fail to follow advice about learning outside the classroom? Why do my students fall asleep in class? Why do some students come on a course not prepared or willing to learn? Why do some students find it difficult to remember or recall vocabulary? And why can't my students learn to spell? All of these come from my book, Hanks 2017, the reference. So those puzzles came from the normal times of teaching, what we had before COVID. But since the pandemic, as I say, we've been teaching online, and we've got some new puzzles. So these are questions that puzzle me and puzzle my colleagues as we are struggling to teach our learners in this new way. So a typical question might be, why don't my learners speak in class? Well, this is even more important in teaching online. My students rarely speak because it means they have to switch on their camera and their microphone. There may be many, many reasons why they don't do that. Some may be practical, but some may be emotional. In other words, they may have low bandwidth or poor technology, or it may be that they feel shy to speak in front of other people and more shy online than in face-to-face. Another question that comes to my mind is, why do I love face-to-face teaching? I really notice the difference, and I miss being in the classroom with my students. So why is that? Why do I love it? Another question is, why are my learners motivated? We could turn that round and say, why are my learners not motivated? But either way, the question is about motivation. And what is it? Why? Why are they or are they not motivated? Another one, why do I struggle with online teaching? This may be familiar to many. Many of my colleagues ask, why don't my learners turn on their cameras? And one that I find really interesting actually is, why do the learners use chat more than talking with microphones or cameras? So if I were actually with you, and I wish I was, then I would now ask you to take a moment to talk together and to think about what puzzles you about your language learning teaching experiences. And you might divide these puzzles into what puzzles you normally and what puzzles you in this new normal. So what I'm talking about today is this notion of exploring practice. In other words, using our practice, our normal teaching activities, to help us to explore our puzzles or our questions about that practice. And the idea is that as we continue this exploring and practicing and exploring and practicing, that we integrate research and pedagogy, and at the same time, we enhance our quality of life. This is important because frequently teachers are exhausted. We are constantly on the verge of burnout. So quality of life is so important. And I noticed this quote from Zhilang Zhen and Hu Meixing from China, talking about Chinese teachers. And there's a saying apparently in Chinese that they are compared to candles. In other words, teachers are sacrificing themselves in the process of cultivating learners, just like a candle that burns itself out while giving light to others. This bleak image of teachers as burnt out candles is transformed into a new one when we think of teachers as learners. In other words, teachers are learning at the same time as learners are learning. In classroom teaching, teachers may grow with learners if they communicate with them and create learning opportunities for all. If you're interested, this stems from the exploratory practice framework of 7 principles for practitioner research. The first one is most relevant to today's talk. Put quality of life first. In other words, whatever we do, it needs to enhance our quality of life, not add to the burden. Principle number 2, work primarily to understand classroom language learning life. In other words, trying to focus on understanding rather than solving a problem. There are so many problems that we cannot solve, but actually, if we try to understand some of them, our quality of life may be enhanced. also to do with quality of life is this notion of involving everybody and bringing people together. As we are frequently isolated during the pandemic, this idea of being together, of working together, and working also, number 5, for mutual development, it really, you can understand why this contributes to our quality of life. Principle number 6 is to make the work a continuous enterprise. In other words, make it manageable and sustainable, not adding to the burden. Teachers already have an incredibly busy life, a heavy workload, marking, teaching, preparing, doing administration, and so on. So whatever we do, it needs to be integrating the work for understanding into our existing curricular practices, in other words, our normal teaching practices. So in this way, we minimize the burden and we maximize sustainability. And if you're interested in reading more about this, then you can have a look at Allwright 2005, Allwright and Hanks 2009, or Hanks 2017. So what might this look like in practice? Well, I've done this with my own students a few years ago now, with exploratory practice as a form of case studies. So I had 2 courses, 2 years apart. On each course, which was about 10 or 11 weeks long, between 4 and 6 weeks were included an exploratory practice strand. In those classes, we moved from preparation, in other words, the students puzzling, starting investigations, more puzzling. The students formed groups around puzzle topics, for example, speaking or reading, or, why is it difficult to speak? Why don't I like reading or writing? Why am I enjoying my writing classes, and so on. They tried data collection on a very small scale, of course, but nevertheless quite rigorous. They tried interviews, questionnaires, library and internet searches, and they analysed this data and collated it into presentations. These groups of learners delivered 20-minute poster presentations of their findings, and the presentations were given by the learners for the learners and their teachers. And they followed this up with some group writing practice. Now, you don't have to do it this way. It's just that these are the kinds of things that we would normally do on the English for Academic Purposes courses that I was teaching. So I simply used the same activities, the same pedagogic practice as I would normally do, as a way of investigating their and my puzzles. So the students were puzzling and I was puzzling at the same time. The students found this very interesting because nobody had ever asked them what puzzles you about your learning before. So one of the students, who I will call Ted, it's not his real name, but he was a Japanese student, but he became very excited by this process. And he said, "Oh, I think it's very interesting. Like recycling," which is what he normally had to write about. Recycling, we know we have to do recycling, and we know we have to reduce many things, many rubbish. So I can't find any point to write an essay. But something new, I can write about it. So he became very interested. His puzzle was very different from the others. It was about, why do I learn bad words more easily than other kinds of words? And he conducted a very interesting study, actually. So if you're interested, you can read more about him. I've provided a link to an article, and of course there is also a book that you can have a look at. Ted's teacher also found it interesting. She thought it was very refreshing. She said, well, it's a nice position to say, well, you tell me the answers. If you say, go and research recycling, I've read so much on it, I feel like I know the answers, so you're not telling me anything new. So, again, she was Ted's teacher, so this question about why do we learn bad words more easily than other words, she said, I was actually genuinely interested. I didn't have to feign interest, and I think that was refreshing for them and for me. In the same class, there was another student who I've called Ahmed, again, not his real name, and he showed great understanding not only of his own position, but also of his teachers. He said, I think many teachers say, I do my best. Why don't they understand? I'm trying. Why are they just talking? Why don't they try their homework? Why don't they come to class? Ahmed said, I think it's very important because education is not just teaching, it's teaching from one side and learning from the other side. So, what did we do in these case studies? Well, the learners set their own research agendas, their puzzles. They worked together to explore those agendas. And they worked with teachers to collect or generate data, analyse the data, and prepared presentations of their findings. They gave poster presentations to other learners and teachers, and they wrote group methodology assignments. All the time, they were practicing key language skills. They were talking in English, and they were also practicing academic skills whilst they were conducting their research. And what was very interesting was they became more and more excited. Usually when I'm teaching English for academic purposes, it seems people think it's going to be rather boring, a little bit dull. They know that they need to do it, but it's kind of dull. But these students became very excited. They stayed late after class. They were really interested not only in their own questions, but also in the puzzles of other students. And they went around asking each other, what did you think? What did you find out? So that was interesting, highly motivating in itself. At the same time as the learners puzzling, the teachers were also puzzling. So the teachers continued to analyse their puzzles in more depth. We thought about, okay, what started or triggered the question? The teachers began to read around the topic, talk to other teachers, and shared their puzzles and experiences. They investigated in more depth, for example, interviewing or observing or conducting questionnaires, reading journals, and so on. They collected a small amount of data and they collated that information. Following that, some teachers then went on to lead teacher development workshops for other colleagues. They wrote articles or blog posts. They presented at conferences. But most importantly, they reflected and talked to friends and colleagues. One of the teachers became very interested, and I've called her Bella here. She continued her investigations, she asked her learners, she read books and articles, and she thought deeply about her question. She discussed with another teacher, and together they led a teacher development workshop in her workplace. She then presented her work at a national conference, and then she went to an international conference, and she has written about her work in blogs, journal articles, and so on. But that's not to say that everybody has to do the same thing. Another teacher, who I call Jenny, she just wanted to continue with exploratory practice, but not to write about it or to present at conferences. She's focused on creativity in her teaching. She's still interested and still enjoys it, but she doesn't feel any pressure to write or to present or to go to conferences. Both possibilities are equally valid in my view. What's important is that both teachers and learners can be thinking about, questioning and puzzling about their own teaching and learning practices. So it's that active thinking and learning, active thinking and teaching and learning that we want. I've just got time to tell you about a second project, one which also involved multimodal methods of investigation. So I've talked about exploratory practice and quality of life, and this informed another project to do with sticky objects and photographs. This was funded by the British Council. It's called Sticky Objects and Pathways to Wellbeing and Resilience, Teacher Understandings of and Practices in Positive Psychology in Their Classrooms. This was just published in May 2020, and so of course there is some relevance to what is going on during the 2020 pandemic. One of the things that we found very interesting was even when the project officially ended, we, that is the teacher researchers in our little group and some of the other teachers involved, enjoyed it so much that we wanted to continue, we wanted to carry on. So I'll just talk very briefly about this project. We were focusing on positive emotions. There's a lot of work in the field about negative emotions such as anxiety, lack of motivation and so on, but not so much about positive. So we took as our original starting point this idea of sticky objects, which comes from Ahmed's work, Sarah Ahmed in 2014, talking about the kinds of objects to which emotions stick. And if we think about 2020, there are all sorts of images and objects that are incredibly emotional, that emotions attach themselves to them. So when you think about 2020, are there any images that stick in your mind? What objects did you notice? What emotions stick to those objects? And I'm wondering, did you take any photographs just on your phone or with a little camera, or did you do any writing during the lockdown period in your country? So in my case, I took a lot of photographs, and interestingly, the objects that I took photographs of were a lot of flowers, to make myself feel happier, just enjoying looking at those flowers. And also in this country, lots of children were drawing pictures of rainbows. And so that rainbow image really sticks in my mind as a sticky object, an object to which emotions are attached. So one good example would be that they were playing Kahoot, and the teacher said, well, we were playing the Kahoot spelling game and I told them the rule I before E except C. All the students looked amazed. One student told me he'd always struggled with spelling and was quite happy to find out about the rule. I couldn't believe how such a small detail could make a change in the learning process. So this person's sticky object was the photograph of the app, and then all of the things that come together with that photograph, how these tiny details make a change in the learning process, and this made the teacher feel good. I mentioned coffee and coffee cups, and coffee also seemed to signify a lot of different things for the teachers, but one of them was this sense that coffee is a luxury and it makes you feel happy. Yeah, so it's a moment where you feel good, you're looking after yourself. So again, something to do with quality of life, something to do with well-being. So how can we explore the new normal in educational practice? Well, one possibility is to start by asking what puzzles you about your own teaching or learning practices. So whether you're a teacher or a learner or both, think about what puzzles you. Ask the question, why? Go back to some of those questions I asked at the beginning. Why do I want my students to speak in online situations? Why do I want them to speak in class? It's an interesting question. Then think about how could you investigate your puzzle? One possibility might be about taking daily pictures of sticky objects and writing about them. Please remember, of course, if you're taking pictures, not to take pictures of people without their permission. That would be unethical. So we need to be ethical. We need to make sure that most of our pictures, and you'll notice the ones I have here, are not including people. Then you might think about those sticky objects from your classroom. Could be a pen, could be a whiteboard or a blackboard, could be a desk, could be any number of different objects. But think about, how do you feel about this object? What does it mean to you? And then think about, how do you feel while you're doing this? What about your well-being? Because while we were in the lockdown, I was taking photographs almost every day. And it was very interesting, the concerted effort to try to take a picture and try to think about, okay, what emotions are attached to this. They actually contributed to my own well-being. I felt happier after I had taken the photograph and thought about it. It was kind of like a gratitude diary, but of course thinking quite intellectually about what's happening in my teaching, what's happening in my life that is to do with pedagogy. So if you're interested in knowing more about any of these issues, I've included here the links to two useful websites. One is the website about fully inclusive practitioner research. So that is the website which includes action research, exploratory practice, reflective practice and lesson study. And you're very welcome to go along, take a look. It's completely free, but have a look at what other people around the world are doing. The second website is from the British Council, and it is the report about the Sticky Objects and Pathways to Wellbeing project. So I think you may find that interesting as well. If you want to read more, here are some books that you may find interesting. The full references are in the list at the end of the PowerPoint. So in conclusion, I've talked about exploratory practice and about the need to focus on quality of life and understanding. I've talked also about emotions, positive emotions especially, and sticky objects. But to sum up, when we think about classrooms, about education, about educational research, we are constantly engaged in struggling to understand our classrooms, even in normal times. This is amplified during the pandemic. To understand our new normal, we need to ask questions about and to explore our practices. Exploratory practice using sticky objects, diaries and photographs can help us to positively connote for well-being. We begin to understand more, we begin to understand each other more. Although that's all of us, learners, teachers, teacher educators, everybody, although we are tired and stressed, there are still some treasures that we can keep from this difficult time, enhancing quality of life.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, all audience, this is the video. The topic is very interesting and it is related to language learning. Actually, it is about exploring the new normal in education practice, researching quality of life, resilience, and well-being. And we see that, we've heard that we should keep in mind that in teaching activities, there is a teaching in one side and learning on the other side. So those things should be kept in mind while teaching activities. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end part of the plenary session. Of course, if you have questions regarding to the previous video, type your question and then put your email address, and then we will send your question to the speaker, and later on we'll return back the answers to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before I close the session, I would like to take the conclusion from what the speakers have presented previously. Environmental education is needed in a new normal life where personal awareness needs to be developed. And then the next one is we talk about creativity. Creativity with strong relationship or connection among the teachers and students should be developed and maintained to endeavor long life learning. And then the next one, questioning why. In this case, exploratory practice appears to be an appropriate education practice in the new normal teaching activity, since it can enhance quality of life and of course cultivate learners. That is our valuable knowledge in today's plenary session. I'd like to thank so much to all invited speakers for informative and interesting presentation, and to the participants for very active participations during the session, and hopefully the session will be beneficial for everybody. And please give applause for the invited speakers and for you all. And we are very sorry for all inconveniences, and thank you very much for joining this plenary session until the end. And I hope to see you on the next event, and stay healthy. And for now, I would like to return back the event to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you so much and see you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Can leave the Zoom? Can leave the Zoom, moderator? Permisi. Can leave the Zoom?
MC, time is yours. By the way, as we are waiting for the MC to take over, I would like to say thank you so much to Professor Julia Halim and Mr. Darcy and Bapak Dr. Sunarto. Thank you so much.
mic. Test mic 1, 2, 3. Okay. Can we start now? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are so sorry for the technical problems that we just experienced. And once again, we would like to thank Mrs. Lu Angelina Lianawati and all the invited speakers for wonderful presentation, and also for member of conference for questions and comments during the panel session 2. And if you guys want to watch or want to revisit the presentation that just delivered by the invited speakers, you can go to follow YouTube channels as FKIP UKI YouTube channel, LPPM UKI YouTube channel, PRODIP Matematika UKI YouTube channel, and also FKIP UST YouTube channel, as you can rewatch the live streaming that we're also actually live on those YouTube channels at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have finished the panel session 2, we would like to hear the closing statement by Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, Universitas Kristen Indonesia, Dr. Wilson Rajaguguk, MSI, MA. Time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu. His Excellency Profesor Dr. Muhadjir Effendy, MAP, the Coordinating Minister of Human Development and Culture, His Excellency Mr. Nadiem Makarim, BA MBA, Minister of Education and Culture, yang kami hormati Bapak Insinyur Edi Rainal Sinulinga MBA, Ketua Pengurus Yayasan Universitas Kristen Indonesia, yang kami hormati Bapak Dr. Dani Suharaka Harjono SH MH MBA, Rektor Universitas Kristen Indonesia, yang kami hormati Bapak Dr. Randus Sunarto M.Hum, Dekan Fakultas Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan Universitas Kristen Indonesia, the Honorable all the invited speakers, Matthew Miller, Dr. Nathan Tintel, Profesor Amrin Saragi, Dr. Sunarto, Darcy Dredke Maher, Profesor Lilian Halim, Profesor Dr. Judith Hanks, the Honorable Mr. Chairman of the committee, and all of the audience who has participated in this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that all of you have well done through the 2 days conference. It is my great pleasure that you had fruitful discussion through. I think 2 days it is not enough. I expected that every participant to make a presentation on education, science, or other field will develop our capacity in writing, strengthen the competitiveness of our university and our country. I wanted you to understand the difference and promote mutual understanding among the participants through this conference. I observed your excellent presentation and active discussion, so I can conclude the purpose of this conference had been completely accomplished. In addition, your positive manner revealed that you have made careful preparation and great effort for your participation in advance. I would like to pay my deep respect to all the participants for your positive participation in this conference. I hope that what we have learned through this conference will help us a lot in our duties to build the nation, culture, and humanity through high-quality publication. I hope we can meet again in the third International Conference on Education and Science next year. Finally, on behalf of Universitas Kristen Indonesia, I would like to express my appreciation to all of the participants for taking time out of your busy duties to participate, and to all your organization for sending excellent participants to this conference. I would like to close my remarks and officially announce the end of the conference, wishing the future prosperity of all us. Thank you your attention. God bless all of you. God bless us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson Rajaguguk. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of the conference, Head of English Education Study Program, Mr. Henry Kusmale, SPD M.Hum, will lead us in a closing prayer.
Okay. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We have done a two-day international conference on education and science. Now let us finish this seminar by praying. Allow me to lead this prayer in Christian way. Heavenly Father, we thank you very much for a two-day conference. You have blessed us, blessed the speakers, blessed the presenters, the participants, and all the committees. Thank you very much, Father. We surrender all this activity into thy name. Thank you. We ask thy forgiveness so that we may receive your blessings for the next. Once again, Father, thank you. Bless Uki, bless Indonesia, bless all of us here. In the name of Jesus Christ, we have prayed. Hallelujah. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Henry Kusmale. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wrapped up our second ICES, or International Conference on Education and Science, organized by the Faculty of Education and Teacher Training, Universitas Kristen Indonesia. We would like once again thank all the speakers, presenters, participants, and everyone who has joined and contributed in this international conference. On behalf of the committee, we also would like to say sorry, and we would like to apologize for the inconvenience you might have experienced during this conference. I'm Herto Bastian Abul signing off. Thank you so much. God bless you. Stay safe. Okay, I just got an information that we need to have a picture together with all the, okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we close this conference, we would like to invite you to turn your camera on so we can have a picture together. Along with the committee, we would like to invite all the working committee to come on stage. So the picture on the Zoom will be complete. Don't forget to wear your mask and keep your safe distance. Yep. And we also would like to invite Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, Dr. Wilson Raja Guguk, alongside the Dean of the Faculty of Education and Teacher Training to come on stage as well. While our committee and the leaders are preparing the best post, I would like to also remind you that this is annual conference. So we would like to remind you that next year, this ICES or International Conference on Education and Science will come back, of course, and please feel free to participate again. Okay. It seems that everyone is ready on stage. What about the camera? All the camera, please turn on, please, all the camera. And now we will take the picture on 1, 2, 3. There's no sound, but it's okay, okay? Yes, we don't have sound effect for that. Okay, once again, please give your best smile. 1, 2, 3. Wait, as we have multiple layers of participants, so once again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, are we good? Okay, thank you so much. No problem, later after this. Okay, once again, I would like to say thank you so much for joining. Let's give a big round of applause once again for this program. See you next year on the 3rd International Conference of Education and Science organized by the Faculty of Education and Teacher Training, Universitas Kristen, Indonesia. Sayonara, God bless you, bye-bye.
Buset, dari jam 8 loh sampai jam 4.
Keep calm and stay cihui.
Stay cihui, panitia cihui.
Cihui panitia. Udah ya, oke ya.
Terima kasih, Mem.
Ya.
Sampai ketemu.
Sampai ketemu di kampus.
Iya, Mem.
Oke ya, I'm leaving the chat ya.
Oke, Mem. Thank you.
Oke, bye-bye everyone.
Bye-bye.